So he's not only, a young charismatic guy, but at the same time, he's a really important stakeholder for diversity awareness and social inclusion in both non-formal and formal inclusion in Germany. So a little bit of background, he's a trained social worker and social scientist. So he'll tell us about what he does shortly. Also active as project manager, evaluator, trainer, working on intersection between the academia on one hand and practice on the other hand, trying to channel the evidence and make it usable so that us who are working in inclusion field have some identified needs, interests, practices and innovation that we can learn from. So currently, Andreas is interested in research on the impact, strategies on inclusion and access. And he's also, as I understand, analyzing system structures of youth work, working with alumni and many, many, many more things. So really proud to present Andreas to you, and over to you, Andreas, to do your magic.
All right, thank you very much. That was a lot, but I hope I can match the expectations here. Yeah, sorry, thank you for inviting me again, and sorry for not being with you this morning, but I had another meeting that I couldn't skip. So happy to be here and to present our findings from a research project. I will start with that in a minute. I have a little presentation prepared that I would like to share. So as you may have seen already, I will tell you something about why young people are not participating in youth exchange programs and what we can do about it. These input, my talk right now is based on the findings of a research project that we did 3 years ago. It's still valid, I guess, so I think it's a good time to talk about it. It was called the Access Study. And when I'm talking about us, that is my organization, Transfer e.V., that I'm working for, and the network I'm coordinating, which is called Research and Practice and Dialogue in International Youth Work. You might guess that it is somehow based in the intersection in between academia and practice. So that's what we do. We try to disseminate findings, research findings into practice and discuss them there. So to start with my presentation, I would just give you a short overview about what I will talk about, because of course I will start with the research, but I don't want to get into every tiny detail of what we did because it was a huge project, and I could talk about, I don't know, an hour or so about the findings even more, and I don't want to do that here. So I narrowed it down to the following question. I have to give you a bit of a background of the focus of the research, but then I would like to continue about the knowledge of young people that we've talked to, about their motivation to take part, but also the restraints and barriers they face, and the perspective of youth workers that we have talked to. And then at the end, which might be very interesting for you as well, about follow-up processes that are running currently here in Germany. And that foreign information at the beginning, because every time I refer to our findings, they are based on the German framework. So we talk to young people here in Germany who are living in Germany. I think some of the findings are also relevant for other countries, but some are also very different. So you have to keep in mind that every time I'm talking about young people, I'm talking about young people living in Germany. Okay, as I said, I have to give you kind of background, so about the objectives and about the design of the research project. The formulated political will, and I think all of us can go with that, is that every young person should at some point of their biography have the chance and the opportunity to go abroad and learn. And this was kind of the starting point, because right now the reality I guess that's also clear for most of us, is that this is not the case. And we were thinking about who are those who are already participating. Of course, this is interesting for us, but maybe it's even more interesting, who are those who are not yet participating? So who are the non-participants? Why are they not participating? And what could we do to reach out to them? Well, giving you kind of a spoiler, we had this naive idea that maybe at the end we have this group, I don't know, X, Y, whatever we would like to call them, with specific characteristics and a concrete idea what we can do to include them into our programs. I can't give you that. So that's not what I will talk about in the coming minutes, because the findings, the outcome of the research was more complex as we thought. So we don't have this to reach A, do B idea, but I think I can give you an overview about what could be potential steps in future. What I also would like to mention is that, of course, we didn't do the research, but we worked together with 4 research partners. It was a mixed method study, so we used quantitative and qualitative methods. And I would like to focus on a representative survey we did with more than 2,000 young people here in Germany. And then also interviews with 49 non-participants who had never, ever participated in a mobility project. And then as well with 40 youth workers active in the field. So this is kind of what I will talk about. And before I come to the findings, you kind of need to understand this one. I will keep it short, but the important part is the part in the middle. Because of course, there are a trillion different formats of learning mobility. You can imagine how it could look like, but we kind of made a definition of what we would like to analyze. And this is the one with the darker orange look. Here, these are formats which match 2 criteria that we defined at the beginning. First is that there is an encounter between young people. So it's given that a group of young people from one country is meeting a group from another country in another country, or a young person from Germany goes to Poland meeting young people from other European countries and interacting with each other. The contrary would be a closed group from Germany is going, I don't know, to Belgium, not meeting any Belgian people, coming back and haven't talked to, I don't know, anyone there but themselves. This would be the contrary of what we thought would be an encounter project. So our first criteria is that young people are interacting with other young people from other countries. And the second one would be that there is a pedagogical framework. So young people are prepared to go abroad. There is a program that they can be part of, etc., etc. I think we all know what I'm talking about. And when these first 2 criteria are matched, we are defining this as our core object here, which we call then international youth exchange. It happens in non-formal and formal education. Both were analyzed in our study. And of course, if you right now feel disappointed because you're saying, of course, a youth camp abroad can also match these 2 criteria, definitely they can. But our idea was that it is more likely that the criteria are matched in the middle, more darker orange part. So every time I'm talking about international youth exchange, by now you know what I mean. So then the next step we did, this is out of the sample of 2,380 young people we talked to. It's representative. We worked with a research institute called Sinus. They do studies. I will come to that later. I don't have to explain that now. But what they asked was, which formats do you know of? Which formats have you participated in? And this is shown here. The dark orange part is actual participation. So that is when young people said, okay, I've already experienced a format like that. The lighter orange one, they have at least heard about it. So they knew what, for example, a school exchange in a group would be. 72% said so. And the gray one means they have never ever heard about a format like this before in their lives. Looking to the core of our research, these are the ones with the boxes. You see already some differences between non-formal and formal learning. Whereas, again, I go to the school exchange and group, you only have 11% of respondents saying, I didn't know that something like this was existing. And already 17% had participated in a project like that. We found a contrary picture for international youth encounters, where you see 45% of respondents saying that they didn't know something like this exists. So 45% of these 2,380 young people responded that they didn't know about the opportunity to take part in an international youth exchange. Talking to a group like you, I think that's the most common thing we do. So that was kind of disappointing somehow, that there is this huge differentiation between formal and non-formal education. To sum that up, we made another graph, which is showing or explaining the current target group, but also groups of potentially interested young people. I began with the current target group. 26% summed up of all respondents have already participated in a mobility project, either in formal or in non-formal education. It's an okay number, 26%. That it's a good number. So 26% of all young people, we could say, have been abroad in a project of the core area. But then it's also interesting to see that another 26% have maybe been abroad in another form. For example, they have had a semester abroad, or they made this trip with a group, which was this design of going to Belgium, not talking to any Belgian. But they would be willing to participate in a format in the core area in future. That's 26%. And then another 11% who had never been abroad at all. So they never traveled even to another country, but they would be highly interested to participate in the core area in future, which made 37% of a potential future target group. But that also means that right now we fail somehow to reach out to these 37% of a potential target group. Which then comes to conclusions when I come to the next points. There is another group of 37% who said clearly that they are not interested to go abroad, and that were for solid reasons. For example, there was this girl who said, well, I have a horse and I have to take care of it, and I could never ever imagine to leave for a longer period. And I think that's okay too. Maybe we don't have to reach those 37% who have solid reasons for not going. If there are another 37% we could reach who are easily to convince. And therefore, I would like to go to the next model. As I said before, I will only do that shortly. But we kind of mixed this model, which shows the livelihoods of young people in Germany, together with the target group pie chart I showed you before. And only to explain that very, very shortly, you see the level of education on the axis, which is differentiated to low, middle, and high. And then you see on like the mindset of values, normative orientation, from traditional to modern to postmodern. Going to two clusters, as I said, I just can do it briefly, but you see, for example, the precarious cluster, the so-called precarious cluster, which is in the bottom left part, so low education and a more traditional mindset, which could be easily thought of where we don't reach them. And yes, it is the case. They are underrepresented in most of the formats. But as well, there are formats which seem to be an access factor for them. For example, when you think about sports associations and clubs, organizing mobility projects, the level of underrepresentation is much lower than in other projects. And then going to the so-called social ecological cluster, which is in the middle top part of the graph. You guess this could be one of our top priority target groups. Young people who are very interested, maybe a bit critical, have a special interest in intercultural projects, but they only have a very limited time budget, which leads to the fact that in general, they are underrepresented as well. So combined, we see this picture that, for example, as I was talking about those two, the precarious, this is the dark lilac purple part. We have 6% in the current target group, so underrepresentation definitely. But for the interested group too, so those who never have been abroad but are very willing to participate in future, the amount almost rises for another third of this part. So underrepresentation could be tackled somehow. And then the same is for the social ecological, which is the second column from above. You also see a rise. If certain aspects would have changed, this target group would participate in a higher amount in future. And this brings me to the next point, because of course it's important to know what are the popular restraints and barriers that are keeping young people apart from participating in international youth exchange projects. And I guess most of you will think now, well, that doesn't come with a huge surprise if I'm reading through this list. Most of these points I know, or I anticipated before that this could be actual valid reasons. But I will go to detail a little bit more here, because of course it seemed to be a logical answer from most of young people that, well, it costs so much and this is the reason, because that's the reason why I can't participate. Problem here is when you think about the formats that young people know, most of them referred to a very popular format, which is, or a very popular format here in Germany, which is the long-term high school stay in the States. Super pricey, a very long-term thing. You have to have some resources. And of course, young people then say, well, it costs too much, especially then if they don't know about projects which are not that pricey, or even for free, or just for a little amount of money. The same is for no information. I think that's the most popular answer. Okay, if young people don't know, we have to have another flyer or another video or whatever. Asked for the source of information, like where do you want to get the information about youth exchanges, most people said, well, I think school would be a proper place. Thinking about school then makes it a bit more complicated, because somehow there is a mechanism that we found out during our interviews, that most of young people who get information about going abroad in school have this idea of, okay, I need to have at least an A in English or in French to go to another place. And if this is not the case, well, that's not for me. So kind of an automatic exclusion factor because of an anticipated fear of not fitting into the project, because somehow the school environment tends to tell them so. It's not that I'm saying that every teacher is picking like the best students of his class to go for an exchange program, for example, to Poland or to France. But somehow this picture is there that only the well-suited, the very good students are taking part in this projects. So they have kind of the same idea for the non-formal world. So this is kind of the interesting things that were in between the lines. Of course, this list makes sense if you look to that, but if you go deeper into detail, and you will find that in the materials that we have published, it's kind of interesting to come to the conclusion that actually non-participation, that's the right way, is not because young people are demotivated. That's generally not the case. We could see a high number of motivation to participate, but we need to focus on structural obstacles that need to be removed, and there need to be kind of a system to advise young people in their individual fears and concerns, because most of them are easily to get rid of. For example, language barriers, where we see in another survey that was also part of our study, that at the end, those who feared that they are not able to communicate in another country, after participating, said it wasn't a problem at all because we managed. And I think we have this experience, all of us. A last point of the findings before I continue with the follow-up processes is that the perspectives of youth workers were quite crucial and interesting for further discussions, because we could kind of channel or understand two tales of our field that we firstly pointed out with the tale of international youth work being a luxury. Therefore, you need to know that here in Germany, we kind of have a good structure of youth work, but this is mostly local. Youth work as an international dimension is not very widespread, and it is something we have to work on very consequently to allow access, a better access. Because right now what is happening is that youth workers understand their job more as a local thing, and going abroad is kind of an on-top thing, an on-top activity they would have to do, given the fact that their job is already very demanding. And some of them also said, like, well, it's seen as vacation from my supervisors, so I have to convince them as well. And this is also an interesting point, the tale of non-participants being disadvantaged. So it's easily to say that everyone we don't reach somehow has a disadvantage in life, or is generally seen as a young people with fewer opportunities. But that there are also those who are willing to take part, not able to do so because of whatever reason, not facing any disadvantage at all, because they come from a very well-mannered background, good educated, there's enough money, stuff like that. We also have to take this into consideration, because what happens if we see non-participants at disadvantage is something that we called like this idea of you have to have a certain ability to fit in our formats. You have to bring a certain mindset to go abroad. And so the question of access became like a target group question. Are you able to go abroad with us as an organization? Or should we pick another person who has better grades, who is better able to speak the language, stuff like that? So what we tend to forget is that it is more a structural phenomenon, and we need to have this discourse shift and really crack these structural problems, and be therefore able to advise young people how to participate in future and forget about this ability thing. So the follow-up processes. As I said before, what we didn't have as an outcome was this, okay, this is the group of non-participants and you could do that to reach them in future. So we need to find another way to come to solutions and conclusions. So what we did was a huge follow-up process to disseminate the findings. We actually did 10 events here in Germany, but also abroad, to discuss our findings with local youth work entities, because also in Germany, we have 16 so-called Länder. Länder, which are 16 regions in our country with different youth work structures. So of course you need to identify the structural barriers or the realities of young people on the spot, and not just say, okay, these are our findings, take them and make something out of them, but come to strategies that are coming from local entities to promote international youth work in this region. For example, right now we are conducting another study in northeastern Germany to find out about the willingness and the acceptance of youth workers in this region to work internationally, because this is something then you could tackle in the next step. Another thing is that we promoted a quality framework in a region in the middle of Germany, which will then go to the funding scheme for youth work to promote a certain quality aspect of international youth work projects in this region or from this region. And I'm a little bit out of time, so of course there's additional material and publication that we produced. I will come to that in a minute. And we initiated a European discourse about the findings in 4 international events, and we would like to keep that up too, because we saw that there are interesting combinations. And of course, inclusion is not a national discourse, but we can learn from each other. And for example, in France and Finland, we found out that there are already some very interesting things going on for our reality here in Germany that we could make use of. And then we have 3 focus points of change. I will just go to that now, which are, as I said before, there need to be a flexibility in exchange formats. Of course, there are a lot of ways to go abroad, and also Corona showed, or the pandemic showed, that the variety can also be bigger somehow, because there's a huge creativity in the field. But what we also saw that young people ask for formats that are more oriented on their interests and their needs. So what we are doing right now is to organize participatory workshops with young people, with groups of young people, to create and design their own ways to go abroad. And we also have a research partner in this project to analyze the findings and all the things that young people say during this workshop, which is not just the outcome, the concrete way of going abroad, but everything they mention when it comes to the characteristics and framework of these formats. Then there's a focus on the structural dimension of youth work. So to promote local youth work, which is a necessary step to support young people in their way towards participating in international youth exchange projects, is something that is very important for us. So right now we are analyzing beneficial conditions for promoting international dimensions on local levels, because this is also very, very different in different regions in Germany. And of course, promoting international youth exchange through training, through sensibilizing young youth workers in their way of defining their role as a youth worker. And also we have a program for financial supports for students who are willing to write their thesis, for example, in the field of international youth work, to also promote like future generations of youth workers actively involved in our field of international youth work. So to sum up, there need to be a lot of things done in our context here, but I think with a research project like this, we have a valid structure to use and valid knowledge to kind of promote into certain action. Of course, the pandemic has somehow got in between, but that's also not surprising, and we are still running towards this follow-up processes. So if you would like to get more information about that, feel free to use the resources that we have. There is, on this chart, you will find the link for the findings in English we just publicated. And of course, there are also our home pages that you could inform yourself. For now, I would like to say thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions. If there's anything you would like to know, let me know. And yeah, thank you very much.